You think those handcuffs make you powerful? Son, you just put shackles on a hurricane. They thought she was just another defiant woman in civilian clothes. They thought talking back was a crime worthy of humiliation. They were wrong, dead wrong. When officers Brock Harlan and Trent Maddox slammed General Beatrice Washington against the hood of their cruiser, they didn't see the 4 stars she'd earned in combat. They only saw a target, but they forgot one thing. The Pentagon doesn't sleep, and it definitely doesn't leave its generals behind. What happens when a corrupt small-town police force accidentally declares war on the United States Army? You're about to find out. This isn't just justice, this is a nuclear impact. The heat in Oak Haven, Georgia, was the kind that didn't just sit on you. It wrestled you to the ground and held you there. It was a sticky, claustrophobic August afternoon. The air hung thick with the smell of asphalt and pine needles baking in the sun. General Beatrice Washington, dressed in a charcoal linen suit that had seen better hours, gripped the steering wheel of her rental, a silver Ford Taurus that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes. She wasn't General Washington today. She was just Aunt Bee, driving from Atlanta to check on her niece, Tasha, whose cryptic text messages about trouble at the shop had been escalating for weeks. Beatrice was 62, but she moved with the kinetic energy of a woman half her age. Her hair was cut in a sharp salt and pepper bob, and her eyes, dark and discerning, had stared down warlords in the Middle East and stubborn senators in D.C. She was currently the commanding general of the Army Material Command, overseeing logistics for the entire U.S. Army. But right now, she was just a black woman doing 38 in a 35 zone, or so she thought. The blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror before she even saw the cruiser. It was an aggressive maneuver. The police car surged up behind her bumper, riding her tail for a solid 10 seconds before hitting the siren. Beatrice let out a sharp sigh, the sound cutting through the quiet car. She checked her speedometer. She was doing exactly the limit. She signaled, pulled over onto the gravel shoulder of County Road 9, and put the car in park. She lowered all 4 windows, a habit from her days training recruits on de-escalation, and placed her hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. In the rearview mirror, she watched 2 officers emerge. One was older, thick around the middle, with a face that looked like it had been carved out of red clay. That was Officer Brock Harlan. The other was younger, jittery, with a high and tight haircut that screamed wannabe operator. That was Officer Trent Maddox. Maddox approached the passenger side, hand resting ominously near his holster. Harlan swaggered to the driver's side. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask for her license. "Get out of the car," Harlan said. His voice was gravel and chewing tobacco. Beatrice didn't move. She kept her eyes forward, her voice calm and modulated, the voice that had briefed presidents. "Officer, I believe standard procedure is to inform me of the reason for the stop and request my identification." "I said get out of the car," Harlan barked, leaning down so his face was inches from the window. "Or are you deaf as well as stupid?" Beatrice turned her head slowly to look at him. "I am neither. I am asking for the probable cause. Probable cause is I think you're driving a stolen vehicle." Harlan lied. The sneer on his face was practiced. It was the look of a man who had done this 1,000 times and never faced a consequence. "We've had reports of a car matching this description running drugs out of Atlanta. This is a rental," Beatrice said, her patience thinning by a micron. "The paperwork is in the glove compartment. My identification is in my purse." "I don't care about your paperwork," Harlan shouted, reaching through the open window to unlock the door from the inside. "Step out now." Beatrice knew the drill. If she resisted, they would escalate. If she complied, they might still escalate, but she'd have the moral high ground on the dash cam, if it was even recording. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stepped out, rising to her full height. She wasn't tall, maybe 5'6", but her posture was impeccable. "Turn around, hands on the hood," Harlan commanded. "Officer, this is unnecessary," Beatrice said firmly. "I am a senior officer in the United States Army. My ID—" "I don't give a damn if you're the Queen of Sheba," Harlan spat. He grabbed her shoulder and shoved her hard against the hot metal of the Taurus. The impact knocked the wind out of her. Pain flared in her hip. Instincts honed by decades of combat training flared. She could have disarmed him in 3 moves. She could have shattered his wrist and driven his face into the hood before Maddox could draw his weapon. But she knew better. In Oak Haven, that would be a death sentence. "You are making a mistake," Beatrice said, her voice dropping an octave. It wasn't a plea. It was a statement of fact. "The mistake was yours coming into my town," Harlan growled. He kicked her ankles apart harder than necessary. "Maddox, cuff her." Maddox moved in, his hands shaking slightly. He slapped the cuffs on her wrists tight, too tight. The metal bit into the soft skin over the ulnar bone. "What is the charge?" Beatrice demanded, twisting her head to look at Maddox. "Resisting arrest," Maddox said, his voice cracking. "I haven't resisted," Beatrice said, "and you still haven't told me why I was stopped." "Talking back," Harlan said, walking around to face her. He poked a finger into her chest. "Disorderly conduct. Failure to comply. And I don't like your attitude." "My attitude," Beatrice repeated, her eyes locking onto his nameplate. "B. Harlan. Officer Harlan, I am going to give you one chance to walk away from this. My wallet is in the front seat. Inside, you will find a common access card that identifies me as General Beatrice Washington. If you put me in that car, you are arresting a 4-star general on false charges. That is a federal incident you are not equipped to handle." Harlan laughed. It was a wet, ugly sound. "A general? You?" He looked her up and down, taking in the linen suit, the civilian car, her skin color. "Lady, if you're a general, I'm the director of the FBI. You're a liar. And now we're adding impersonating a military officer to the list." He grabbed her by the bicep and dragged her toward the cruiser. "Check the ID," Beatrice shouted, her composure finally fraying at the edges. "Just check the damn ID." "Shut up." Harlan shoved her head down and forced her into the back of the cruiser. The interior smelled of vomit and pine air freshener. The hard plastic seat was unforgiving as Maddox slammed the door. Beatrice watched Harlan walk back to her rental car. He didn't go for her purse. He opened the trunk. He started rummaging through her suitcase, tossing her meticulously folded clothes onto the dusty roadside. He was looking for something to plant, or perhaps just looking to humiliate her. Beatrice took a deep breath, centering herself. She closed her eyes. Big mistake, Harlan, she thought. Huge. She shifted in the seat, wincing as the cuffs dug deeper. She needed to make a call, but they had taken her phone. It was in her purse, sitting on the passenger seat of the rental, buzzing with unread emails from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The drive to the station was short and silent, save for the crackle of the police radio. Harlan drove with one hand, a smirk plastered on his face. Maddox sat in the passenger seat, looking pale. "Sarge," Maddox whispered, She carried herself like military. You know, the way she stood." "Shut it, Trent," Harlan snapped. "She's a con artist. Probably stole that suit. We book her. We let her stew. Maybe she learned some respect." They pulled into the back of the Oak Haven Police Department, a squat brick building that looked more like a bunker than a civic center. They hauled her out, marching her past the front desk where a bored-looking dispatcher, a woman named Loretta, barely looked up from her magazine. "Fresh meat, Loretta," Harlan announced, impersonating an officer, resisting, disorderly. They took her to the booking room. They took her fingerprints. They took her mugshot. Beatrice stared into the camera lens with a gaze that would later become internet famous. a look of pure, unadulterated fury mixed with icy calculation. "Phone call," Beatrice said as they led her toward the holding cell. "System's down," Harlan lied. "Maybe later." "I have a right to a phone call," Beatrice said, planting her feet. Harlan stopped and turned. "You have the right to shut your mouth before I add assault on an officer to your sheet. You think I won't? It's my word against yours." He shoved her into the cell and slammed the barred door. The lock clicked with a finality that echoed in the small concrete room. Beatrice stood in the center of the cell. It was empty save for a metal bench and a toilet. She checked her watch. She had a scheduled check-in with her chief of staff, Colonel Marcus Reed. If she didn't check in, Marcus would worry. If she didn't check in soon, Marcus would trace her phone. She sat on the bench, back straight, and waited. Meanwhile, in the front of the station, Maddox was holding Beatrice's purse. He was supposed to be inventorying it. He opened the wallet. He saw the driver's license, Beatrice Washington. He saw the credit cards, Platinum Amex. And then he saw it. The white card with the gold chip, the seal of the Department of Defense, the rank insignia. 4 silver stars. General, United States Army. Maddox's blood ran cold. He pulled out his phone and Googled General Beatrice Washington. The first result was a Gov bio. The picture was unmistakable. It was the woman in the cell, wearing a dress uniform heavy with ribbons. Commander, Army Material Command. Distinguished Service Cross. Maddox felt like he was going to throw up. He stood up, trembling, and walked into Harlan's office. "Sarge," he squeaked. Harlan was kicked back, feet on the desk, eating a donut. "What?" "Look," Maddox said, dropping the ID card onto the desk. Harlan glanced at it. He chewed slowly. He swallowed. He picked up the card. He flipped it over. He looked at the hologram. "It's fake," Harlan said, though his voice lacked conviction. "It's not fake, Sarge," Maddox said, his voice rising in panic. "I Googled her. She's real. She's one of the highest-ranking officers in the military, Sarge. She reports to the Secretary of Defense." Harlan stared at the card. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. He had assaulted, kidnapped, and falsely imprisoned a 4-star general. "Delete the body cam footage," Harlan said quietly. "What?" "Delete it. Now!" Harlan roared, slamming his fist on the desk. "We erase the booking. We drive her back to her car. We tell her it was a misunderstanding. We let her go." "She's not going to just let this go, Sarge. She's a general. She's a black woman in Georgia." Harlan hissed, his eyes narrowing. "If there's no record, it never happened. Who are they going to believe? Oak Haven PD or some angry tourist? Now go wipe the server." But they were too late. In the Pentagon, Colonel Marcus Reed was staring at a screen. "Sir?" a lieutenant asked. "General Washington missed her check-in." "I know," Reed said. "I'm tracking her phone. It's stationary. Where is it?" "Oak Haven, Georgia. Looks like a police station." Reed frowned. He picked up the secure line. "Get me the provost marshal, and get me the governor of Georgia on the line. Now." Back in Oak Haven, Beatrice heard the heavy door to the cell block open. Harlan walked in. He wasn't swaggering anymore. He looked pale, clammy. "All right," Harlan said, forcing a smile that looked like a rictus of pain. "Seems there's been a mix-up. We verified your ID. You're free to go." Beatrice didn't move. She stayed seated on the bench, hands folded in her lap. "I don't think so," she said softly. Harlan blinked. "Excuse me?" "I said I don't think so," Beatrice repeated. "You arrested me. You booked me. You fingerprinted me. I am currently a prisoner of the Oak Haven Police Department, and I am not leaving until my lawyer and my military police escort arrive. Now look here." Harlan stepped closer, his voice threatening again. "I'm offering you a way out. You walk out that door, you get in your car, you leave town. We tear up the paperwork. No harm, No foul. No harm? Beatrice raised an eyebrow. You assaulted me. You violated my civil rights. You kidnapped a federal officer. And now? She gestured to the lack of paperwork in his hand. You are attempting to cover up a felony. You listen to me, bitch, Harlan snarled, reverting to type. He grabbed the bars. You walk out of here or you disappear. You understand? People go missing in the swamp all the time. Beatrice stood up and walked to the bars. She stood toe-to-toe with him, separated only by the steel. Officer Harlan, she whispered, you have no idea what you've done. You think you're the predator here? You're not. You're the prey. And the pack is coming. Suddenly the phone in Harlan's pocket buzzed. Then the station alarm blared. Then the landline at the desk started ringing. Sarge, Maddox screamed from the hallway. Sarge, you need to come out here now. Harlan ran out. Beatrice smiled, sat back down, and waited for the fireworks. The chaos in the Oak Haven Police Department started with a phone call, but it ended with a siege. When Harlan ran out to the front desk, Loretta was standing up, her headset clutched in her hand like a dead rat. Brock, she said, her voice trembling, it's the governor. The governor of what? Harlan asked, bewildered. Georgia Brock, the governor of Georgia, is on line 1. Harlan stared at the blinking red light. Before he could reach for it, the second line lit up. That one, Loretta whispered, is the office of Senator Warnock. Line 3 lit up. CNN? Loretta squeaked. Harlan backed away from the desk. Maddox, where's Maddox? Outside. Loretta pointed to the glass front doors. Harlan looked out the window, his jaw unhinged. 2 black SUVs had screeched to a halt in the parking lot, blocking the exit. 4 men in dark suits were exiting the vehicles. They weren't wearing uniforms, but the way they moved, sharp, synchronized, weapons visible beneath tailored jackets, screamed federal agents. But that wasn't what made Harlan's knees knock together. Coming down the main road, lights flashing, was a convoy. Not police cars. These were olive drab Humvees, military police. The nearest army base was Fort Stewart, hours away. But Fort Moore had a detachment nearby for training exercises, and Colonel Reed had called in every favor he had. Harlan burst through the front doors, hand on his gun. Hey, you can't park there. This is private property. The lead agent, a tall man with a shaved head and sunglasses, ignored him. He walked straight up to Harlan, flashing a badge that said FBI. Special Agent Dominic Vale, the man said. We have reason to believe a high-value federal asset is being held illegally in this facility. We got nobody here but a few drunks and a disorderly woman, Harlan shouted, trying to maintain control. Now get those trucks out of my lot. Behind the SUVs, a Humvee jumped the curb, crushing Harlan's prized bed of petunias. A major hopped out, fully kitted in tactical gear. I am Major Colton Brooks, 3rd Military Police Group, the soldier barked. We have tracked the GPS signal of General Beatrice Washington to this location. You have 3 minutes to produce her, or we will breach. Breach? Harlan laughed nervously. You can't breach a police station. That's treason or something. It's a rescue operation of a captured superior officer, Major Brooks said calmly. Inside the cell, Beatrice heard the commotion. She heard the rumble of diesel engines. She heard the shouting. She stood up and straightened her jacket. She smoothed her hair. Harlan ran back inside, sweating profusely. He fumbled for the keys to the cell block. He ran to Beatrice's cell. Get out, he hissed, unlocking the door. Get out now. Go out the back. I don't think I will, Beatrice said. They're going to storm the place, Harlan shrieked. You want to get shot? They won't shoot me, Beatrice said dryly. You, on the other hand, get out. Harlan grabbed her arm to pull her out. Get your hands off her. The voice boomed from the doorway of the cell block. Major Brooks stood there, an M4 carbine slung across his chest, flanked by 2 MPs. Harlan froze. He let go of Beatrice's arm as if it were red-hot iron. "Major," Beatrice said, nodding. "Good of you to join us." "Ma'am?" Major Brooks snapped a salute so crisp it cracked the air. "Are you injured, ma'am?" "Nothing permanent, Major. Just some bruising and a violated ego," Beatrice replied, returning the salute casually. She stepped out of the cell, rubbing her wrists where the cuffs had been. "Secure him," Brooks ordered. 2 MPs lunged forward. Harlan tried to backpedal. "Now wait a minute. I'm the chief of police in this—" He was face down on the concrete before he finished the sentence. Zip ties replaced his badge. Beatrice walked over to Harlan, who was now squirming on the floor of his own jail. She crouched down, her knees popping slightly. "I told you, Brock," she whispered. "I told you to check the ID." She stood up and walked out of the cell block, flanked by her military escort. As she entered the lobby, the scene was chaotic. Maddox was sitting in a chair, crying, being interrogated by Agent Dominic Vale. Loretta was hiding under her desk. Beatrice stopped at the front desk. "Loretta, isn't it?" Loretta peeked out, terrified. "Yes, ma'am. I need my purse and my phone." Loretta scrambled to retrieve them from the evidence bin. Beatrice took her phone. She dialed Marcus Reed. "General," Marcus's voice was frantic. "We have a chopper inbound. Are you safe?" "I'm fine, Marcus, but cancel the chopper. I'm not leaving yet." "Ma'am?" "I'm not leaving until I file a formal report, and I want the JAG Corps down here. I want the Civil Rights Division of the DOJ. And Marcus?" "Yes, General." "Get me the press." The sun was beginning to dip below the pine line, casting long, jagged shadows across the parking lot of the Oak Haven Police Department. But there was no darkness here. The lot was awash in the harsh, rotating blues of police lights, the strobe of federal SUVs, and now the blinding white LEDs of news vans. General Beatrice Washington sat in the lobby of the police station. She hadn't left. She had commandeered the front desk. Loretta, the dispatcher, had been gently relieved of her post and was currently sitting on a folding chair in the break room, weeping into a Dr. Pepper. Beatrice was on the phone with the Pentagon, specifically with the Office of the Secretary of the Army. "Yes, Mr. Secretary," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of command. "I am safe. Major Brooks has the perimeter secured. However, I am not leaving." She listened for a moment. "Because, sir," she continued, glancing at the holding cell where Brock Harlan was now pacing like a caged tiger. "If I leave now, this becomes a story about a misunderstanding. If I stay, it becomes an investigation into systemic corruption. I found something in my car, sir, before they dragged me out." She paused for effect. When Officer Harlan opened my trunk, he didn't just toss my clothes. He dropped a baggie, a small plastic bag with white powder. He tried to plant cocaine in the vehicle of a United States general. I kicked it under the seat before they cuffed me. It's still there. I need a forensics team from the FBI to recover it, or the local chain of custody will make it disappear. The line went silent. Then the secretary's voice came back, cold and hard. "Do not move, General. I'm sending the DOJ Civil Rights Division, and I'm calling the governor." Outside, the situation was deteriorating for the Oak Haven PD. The town's mayor, a sweaty man named Mayor Cyrus Thorpe, had arrived in his Cadillac. He was trying to shout over the noise of the idling Humvees. "This is jurisdiction overreach," Mayor Thorpe screamed at Major Brooks. "You can't occupy a municipal building. I'll have your badge." Major Brooks, who had spent 3 tours in the sandbox and had seen things that would make Thorpe soil his linen trousers, barely blinked. "Sir, under the Uniform Code of Military Justice and federal statutes regarding the kidnapping of a high-ranking officer, this is now a crime scene. Step back behind the yellow tape." "Kidnapping?" Thorpe sputtered. "It was a traffic stop. It was an abduction." A new voice cut in. A black sedan pulled up, bypassing the mayor. Out stepped a woman in a sharp navy suit, carrying a briefcase that looked like it could stop a bullet. This was Attorney General Vivian Hale of Georgia, who had raced down from Atlanta the moment the governor's phone rang. Behind her was a man who looked like he chewed concertina wire for breakfast, Captain Garrett Knox, the JAG officer Beatrice had requested. Knox walked straight past the mayor, flashed his credentials at the MP, and entered the station. Inside, the air conditioning was humming, struggling against the body heat of 20 federal agents. Harlan was in the interrogation room, handcuffed to the table. Maddox was in the adjacent room, sobbing. Beatrice stood up as Knox entered. "Captain," she said. "General," Knox saluted. "Permission to take point on the legal defense?" "Granted. But we're playing offense, Captain. I want everything. His service record, his disciplinary files, the dash cam footage, the body cam footage, and the station server logs." Harlan told Maddox to delete the footage. "I want to know if he succeeded." "If he touched that server," Knox said, a shark-like grin spreading across his face, "that's destruction of evidence. In a federal investigation, that's 5 years right there, before we even get to the assault." Knox turned to the FBI lead, Agent Dominic Vale. "Agent, get a tech on that server. I want to know every keystroke Harlan made in the last hour." While the tech went to work, Knox and Beatrice walked into the observation room to watch Harlan. He was sweating, his face a mask of red blotches. He was shouting at the mirror, "I know my rights. I want my union rep. You can't do this to me. I run this town." "He really believes that," Beatrice mused. "He thinks Oak Haven is his personal kingdom." "Small fish, small pond," Knox said. He never expected a shark to swim through. Then the door opened. Agent Dominic Vale walked in, holding a tablet. His face was grim. "General, you were right about the drugs," Vale said. "We recovered the baggie from your rental. It tested positive for cocaine. But here's the kicker. The baggie has a partial print on the inside of the seal." "Harlan's?" Beatrice asked. "No," Vale said. "We ran it through IAFIS. It belongs to Dante Turbo Russo, a known trafficker out of Atlanta. He's been missing for 3 months." Beatrice's eyes narrowed. Why would Harlan be carrying around drugs belonging to a missing trafficker? "That's what we asked Maddox," Vale said. "The kid cracked, General. He's spilling everything. He says Harlan didn't just plant evidence. He says Harlan is the supply chain." The twist hung in the air like smoke. Beatrice looked through the glass at Harlan. This wasn't just a bad cop. This was a criminal running a cartel with a badge. "Bring Maddox in here," Beatrice commanded. "I want to hear it from him." Officer Trent Maddox looked like a child in his oversized uniform. He sat at the metal table, trembling, a cup of lukewarm water in front of him. Beatrice sat across from him, not as a general, but as a grandmother figure, stern, but listening. Captain Knox stood in the corner, recording. "Trent," Beatrice said softly, "you're in a lot of trouble. Accessory to kidnapping, false imprisonment, conspiracy." Maddox put his head in his hands. "I didn't want to do it. He made me." "I know," Beatrice said. "Brock Harlan is a bully, but right now you have a choice. You can go down with him and spend the next 20 years in Leavenworth, or you can tell us the truth, and maybe, just maybe, Captain Knox can cut a deal with the district attorney." Maddox looked up, tears streaming down his face. He keeps a storage unit out on Route 9 behind the salvage yard." "What's in the storage unit, Trent?" "Everything," Maddox whispered. "Cash, guns, cars he impounded and never reported, and the drugs. When we bust dealers coming through from Atlanta, Harlan doesn't book the seizing. He keeps it. He sells it back to the local gangs in Savannah. He says it's his retirement fund." Beatrice felt a cold fury rising in her chest. "And the baggie he tried to plant on me?" "That was from the last bust," Maddox sniffled. "He always keeps a few on him. Drop pieces, he calls them, just in case he needs to justify a stop. He saw your car. He thought you were just some rich out-of-towner. He wanted to seize the car. He likes Fords. He wanted to steal my rental car? Beatrice asked, incredulous. He runs a chop shop with his cousin, Maddox admitted. If he arrests you, he impounds the car. Then he loses the paperwork. The car gets stripped for parts or repainted and sold. Beatrice stood up, pacing the small room. It was so petty, so small and yet so destructive. How many lives had Harlan ruined for a few $1,000s? How many young men and women were sitting in prison because Harlan needed a new boat? Agent Vale, Beatrice said, turning to the mirror. Get a warrant for that storage unit and bring me the files on every arrest Brock Harlan has made in the last 10 years. The following hours were a blur of activity. The sun went down, but the lights outside only grew brighter. The national news had arrived. CNN was broadcasting live from the edge of the police tape. Anderson Cooper was talking about the general and the sheriff. The warrant was executed. Beatrice, wearing a borrowed FBI windbreaker over her suit, rode with Agent Dominic Vale to the storage unit. It was a rusty metal shack behind a mountain of crushed cars. When they cut the lock and rolled up the door, the smell hit them first. Weed, stale cash, and oil. Inside it was an Aladdin's cave of corruption. There were stacks of cash, vacuum-sealed bricks of 20s and 50s. There were crates of weapons, drop guns with filed-off serial numbers. There were boxes of jewelry, watches, rings, necklaces seized from suspects and never logged. And in the back, under a tarp, was a 1967 Mustang, cherry red. Now, that's not a rental, Vale noted. Beatrice walked over to a shelf lined with evidence bags. She picked one up. It was a child's backpack. Inside was a stuffed bear and an asthma inhaler. The tag read, Evidence, Case 409B, Suspect T, Whitaker. Beatrice whispered the name. She remembered that name. Tobias Whitaker, a young black man who had died in Oak Haven police custody years ago. The official report said resisting arrest, heart failure. She turned to Vale. Get me the file on Tobias Whitaker, now. They drove back to the station in silence. The implications were no longer just about theft. They were about murder. Back at the station, the atmosphere had shifted from chaotic to grimly professional. The FBI had taken over completely. The Oak Haven PD officers who weren't involved, mostly rookies and terrified administrative staff, were huddled in the break room, cooperating fully. Captain Knox met Beatrice at the door. We found something in the server logs. Did Harlan delete the footage? He tried, Knox said, but he's tech illiterate. He dragged the files to the recycle bin but didn't empty it. We have it all. The stop, the assault, the ride to the station, the conversation in the car where he admits to Maddox that he's going to teach you a lesson. Good, Beatrice said, but I found something worse. She slammed the picture of the backpack on the desk. Tobias Whitaker. Knox nodded. I remember the case. It made local news, then vanished. Coroner ruled it accidental. The coroner is Harlan's brother-in-law. Maddox piped up from the corner, where he was now eating a pizza provided by the FBI. Dr. Harlan Crow. He signs whatever Brock tells him to. Beatrice closed her eyes. The web was wider than she thought. We need to exhume the body, she said, and we need to audit the coroner's office. At that moment, the front doors of the station banged open. A man in a frantic sweat ran in. It was Gerald Whitaker, the high-priced defense attorney Harlan had been screaming for. I demand to see my client, Whitaker shouted. This is a violation of his constitutional rights. You cannot hold a chief of police without bail. Beatrice turned slowly. She walked up to Whitaker. She was tired, she was hungry, and she was done. Mr. Whitaker, she said, your client is currently being processed on charges of kidnapping, assault with a deadly weapon, possession of narcotics with intent to distribute, racketeering, and, thanks to new evidence, suspicion of manslaughter. Whitaker blinked. Who are you? I'm the woman he arrested for talking back, Beatrice said. I suggest you tell your client to save his money. He's going to need it for the commissary. Whitaker looked at the army of federal agents, the JAG officers, and the 4-star general standing in front of him. He deflated. Can I see the warrant? You can see it on the news, Beatrice said. She turned to Knox. Captain, set up a press conference. I want to talk to the people of Oak Haven tonight. General, it's late, Knox warned, and the town is angry. There's a crowd forming outside. Some support Harlan. Then let them hear the truth, Beatrice said. I'm not hiding in this station any longer. She walked to the front doors. Major Brooks moved to stop her. Ma'am, security risk. Major, Beatrice said, putting a hand on his shoulder. She pushed open the doors. The flashbulbs were blinding. The roar of the crowd was a physical wave, a mix of cheers and angry shouts. There were signs. Blue Lives Matter clashing with Justice for Beatrice. Beatrice stepped up to the podium that had been hastily set up for the mayor. She adjusted the microphone. The screech of feedback silenced the crowd. She looked out at the faces, the angry, the confused, the hopeful. My name is General Beatrice Washington, she began, her voice projecting without effort. Today, I was arrested for driving while black. I was handcuffed, assaulted, and thrown in a cage because I asked a police officer why. A murmur went through the crowd. But this isn't about me, she continued, because I have the rank, the resources, and the army behind me to fight back. This is about the people who didn't. She held up the photo of the backpack. This belonged to Tobias Whitaker. The crowd went silent. A woman in the front row, Tobias's mother, let out a choked sob. Officer Harlan kept this as a trophy, Beatrice said, her voice shaking with controlled rage, along with the money he stole, along with the drugs he planted. Tonight, the Department of Justice is opening a full investigation into every arrest, every seizure, and every death that has occurred under Brock Harlan's watch. She looked directly into the camera lens, knowing Harlan was watching from the interrogation room TV. Officer Harlan told me that I was in his town, that I was the prey. But he forgot one thing. The oath we swear is to the Constitution, not to a badge. And when you use that badge to oppress the people you are sworn to protect, you are not a police officer. You are a domestic enemy. And the United States Army knows how to deal with enemies. The crowd erupted. Not with violence, but with a release of years of pent-up fear. They cheered, they wept. But the night wasn't over. As Beatrice stepped down, Agent Dominic Vale approached her. General, we cracked Harlan's phone, he said. You need to see this text thread. It's from this morning, before he stopped you. Beatrice took the phone. She read the text. Sender, Mayor Cyrus Thorpe. Message. Need cash for the re-election campaign, Brock. The coffers are empty. Find me some out-of-towners with nice cars. Don't care how you do it. Just get it done. Beatrice looked up. Mayor Cyrus Thorpe was standing by his Cadillac trying to sneak away. Major Brooks, Beatrice said, pointing a steady finger. Apprehend that man. The arrest of Mayor Cyrus Thorpe was not dignified. Unlike General Washington, who had stood tall even while handcuffed, Thorpe went limp. He had to be dragged toward the waiting FBI cruiser, his heels leaving furrows in the manicured lawn of the police station. He was screaming about sovereign immunity and witch hunts, but the handcuffs clicked just the same. You can't do this, Thorpe shrieked as Agent Vale shoved him into the back seat. I know people. I know senators. You're going to need them, Vale said, slamming the door. Inside the station, the atmosphere had shifted from a siege to a forensic excavation. The FBI had seized every computer, every filing cabinet, and every shred of paper in the building. Beatrice, finally allowed to retrieve her own belongings properly, watched from the captain's office as a team of forensic accountants began to dismantle the town's finances. It didn't take long to find the smoking gun. It wasn't even well hidden. In a safe behind a framed portrait of himself in Harlan's office, they found a leather-bound notebook. It was labeled simply, "The Blue Ledger." Captain Knox flipped through it, his face growing paler with every page. He walked over to where Beatrice was sipping a cup of coffee that tasted like battery acid. "General," Knox said quietly, "you need to see this." Beatrice took the book. It was a handwritten log of every seizure Harlan and his cronies had made over the last 5 years. Asterisk Toyota. Camry, driver Hispanic male, seized $4,500 cash. Car to Scrapyard B, processing fee to mayor $1,500. Asterisk Honda Civic, driver, college student, seized laptop, jewelry, donation to sheriff's ball, $800. Asterisk Ford F-150, driver, T. Whitaker, seized contents of backpack, status, deceased. Beatrice's finger traced the entry for Tobias Whitaker. Next to his name, in red ink, Harlan had written, "Problem resolved." "Resolved?" Beatrice whispered, a chill running down her spine. He treated a human life like a clerical error. "There's more," Knox said. "Look at the back. The last few pages detailed payouts, not just to the mayor. There were payments listed for a Judge Reginald Crowe, a DA Reynolds, and surprisingly, a recurring payment to a consulting firm in Atlanta called Guardian Security Solutions." "Guardian Security," Beatrice mused. "That sounds familiar." "It should," Knox said. "It's a private military contractor. They supply equipment to local police departments, surplus gear, tanks, SWAT vans." Beatrice realized the scope of the scam. Harlan wasn't just stealing from motorists to line his pockets. He was using the stolen money to buy military-grade equipment from a private contractor, likely getting kickbacks on the purchases to militarize his tiny police force so they could steal more efficiently. It was a self-sustaining ecosystem of corruption. "Get me the CEO of Guardian Security on the line," Beatrice ordered, "and get me the file on Judge Reginald Crowe. If the judge is on the payroll, every warrant Harlan ever got is fruit of the poisonous tree." The next morning, Oak Haven woke up to a different reality. The National Guard had been deployed to maintain order as the entire police force was effectively suspended. Humvees patrolled the streets where Harlan's cruisers used to prowl. Beatrice was at the local diner, the Rusty Spoon, having breakfast with Colonel Marcus Reed, who had flown in overnight. The diner was packed, but silent. Every eye was on the general in the corner booth. A young waitress approached, her hands shaking as she poured coffee. "Ma'am," she whispered. Beatrice looked up, smiling gently. "Yes, dear?" "My brother. He was arrested by Harlan last year for loitering. They said he had a knife. It was a box cutter for his job at the warehouse. He's been in county lockup waiting for a trial." Beatrice put down her fork. She looked at Knox. "Captain?" "I'm on it," Knox said, pulling out his phone. "What's his name?" "David Langston." "David Langston. Consider him released by noon," Knox said. The waitress burst into tears, and then the dam broke. One by one, the patrons of the diner stood up. They came to the table, they told their stories, the stolen cars, the planted drugs, the excessive fines that forced families into bankruptcy. Beatrice listened to every single one. She took notes. She didn't eat her eggs. By the time she left the diner, she had a list of 42 names, 42 victims of Brock Harlan's reign of terror. "We're going to need a bigger legal team," Reed remarked as they walked back to the command post. "I made a call," Beatrice said, to an old friend. A sleek black town car pulled up to the curb. The door opened, and out stepped a man who looked like he was carved from granite and dressed in Savile Row's finest. It was attorney Quentin Langston, the kind of high-profile civil rights attorney who makes corrupt cops sweat through their Kevlar. General Washington, Langston said, shaking her hand. I saw the news. I cleared my schedule. Quentin. Beatrice nodded. I have 42 plaintiffs for a class action lawsuit against the city, the police department, and the mayor's office. And I have the DOJ filing criminal charges. Music to my ears, Langston smiled. Let's go to court. But Harlan wasn't going down without a fight. From his cell in the county jail, he had made one last call. Not to a lawyer, but to his cousin, the one who ran the chop shop. Get rid of the cars, Harlan had hissed into the receiver. Burn them, all of them. If there's no evidence, there's no case. But Harlan had forgotten one thing. He was under federal surveillance. As his cousin doused the warehouse in gasoline, a drone buzzed overhead. It was a Predator drone, redirected from a training exercise at Fort Moore. Target is attempting to destroy evidence, the operator radioed to Major Brooks. Light him up, Brooks ordered. Not with a missile, with a spotlight so bright it turned night into day. Then, the doors of the warehouse were kicked in by a SWAT team. They caught the cousin holding the gas can. The cars were saved, and in the trunk of a 2019 Lexus, they found something that would seal Harlan's fate forever. They found the body cam footage Harlan thought he had deleted. He hadn't just put it in the recycle bin. He had backed it up to a hard drive he kept in the Lexus, just in case he needed leverage against the mayor. The footage showed everything. The planting of the drugs, the assault on Beatrice, and most damning of all, a video from years ago. It showed Harlan and Maddox standing over Tobias Whitaker. It showed Harlan putting his knee on the boy's neck while Maddox begged him to stop. It showed the light leaving Tobias's eyes, and it showed Harlan laughing as he said, "Write it up as cardiac arrest. The coroner owes me a favor." When Beatrice saw that video, she didn't cry. She went to the window of her hotel room and looked out at the town. "He's a dead man walking," she said, "and I'm going to be the one to pull the switch." The trial of United States versus Brock Harlan et al. Did not take place in Oak Haven. The venue was moved to Atlanta, to a federal courthouse that could handle the media circus. The courtroom was packed. Every major news network was there. The gallery was filled with the families of Harlan's victims, wearing T-shirts with the faces of their loved ones. Brock Harlan sat at the defense table, looking smaller than he ever had in uniform. He was wearing an orange jumpsuit that clashed with his red complexion. His attorney, Gerald Whitaker, looked like a man trying to stop a tsunami with a paper umbrella. Beatrice was the first witness for the prosecution. She wore her dress blues, her chest heavy with medals. The stars on her shoulders caught the light. "General Washington," the prosecutor, a sharp woman named U.S. Attorney Nora Whitaker, began. "Can you describe the events of that August afternoon?" Beatrice described them with clinical precision. She didn't embellish. She didn't get emotional. She simply stated the facts. The stop, the lack of probable cause, the assault, the planting of evidence. "And how did you feel, General, when Officer Harlan placed you in the cell?" "I felt pity," Beatrice said, her voice ringing clear. Harlan's head snapped up. "Pity?" "Yes," Beatrice said, turning to look directly at Harlan. "I have faced enemies who fought for ideology. I have faced enemies who fought for survival. But Officer Harlan fought for nothing but his own ego. He was a small man with a badge, terrified of anything he couldn't control. I didn't fear him. I pitied the hollowness of his soul." Harlan flushed purple. "I was doing my job," he outburst. "Order." Judge Reginald Crowe slammed the gavel. "He was protecting the town," Whitaker shouted, trying to salvage the moment. "Objection. The witness is speculating on my client's state of mind." "Sustained," the judge said, but the damage was done. The jury was looking at Harlan not as a cop, but as a bully. Then came the defense's turn. Whitaker tried to paint Beatrice as an angry, entitled elitist who had provoked the officers. "General," Whitaker sneered, "isn't it true you refused to exit the vehicle immediately? Isn't it true you talked back to the officer?" "I asserted my constitutional rights," Beatrice corrected him. "If that is considered talking back in Oak Haven, then the problem is not with my mouth, but with your client's ears." Laughter in the gallery. Whitaker flustered. But the real blow came when Maddox took the stand. Trent Maddox had taken a plea deal, 5 years in exchange for testimony. He looked broken, but resolved. "Tell us about the Blue Ledger," Nora Whitaker asked. "It was his Bible," Maddox said, his voice trembling. "He wrote down every dollar," he said. "He said the town was a sheep farm, and we were the wolves. He said shearing the sheep was the perk of the job. And Tobias Whitaker?" Maddox started to cry. He didn't resist. He was just walking home. Brock didn't like the way he walked, said he looked arrogant. We stopped him. Brock found the inhaler. He crushed it under his boot just to be mean. The courtroom was silent as a tomb. Brock tackled him. He choked him out. I told him to stop. I tried to pull him off. Brock just laughed. He said, "Let him sleep, Trent. Let him sleep." And the coroner? Brock called Dr. Harlan Crow. He said we got a floater. Make it natural. Crow just asked how much it would cost. Brock said $5,000 and a new golf cart. A collective gasp went through the room. Harlan stood up. "Liar! You rat! I made you!" "Sit down, Mr. Harlan," the judge roared. But the final nail in the coffin wasn't Maddox. It was the surprise witness Beatrice's team had flown in. The prosecution calls Dr. Harlan Crow. The coroner walked in. He had immunity, and he had receipts. "Is it true you falsified the autopsy of Tobias Whitaker?" "Yes," Crow said, looking at his shoes. Brock threatened my family. He said if I didn't do it, my son would get stopped next. And we all knew what happened when Brock stopped someone." Whitaker put his head on the desk. He knew it was over. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they came back, the foreman, a retired schoolteacher, didn't look at Harlan. She looked at Beatrice. "On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, we find the defendant Brock Harlan guilty. On the charge of racketeering, guilty. On the charge of deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty. On the charge of felony murder of Tobias Whitaker, guilty." Harlan didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just slumped in his chair, the air leaving him like a punctured tire. Judge Reginald Crow looked over his glasses. "Brock Harlan, you have disgraced the uniform. You have terrorized a community. You have taken a life. I am sentencing you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole, plus 100 years for the RICO charges." He banged the gavel. "Get him out of my sight." As the marshals hauled Harlan away, he looked back at Beatrice. "You ruined everything," he shouted. "Over a traffic ticket. You ruined my life." Beatrice stood up. She walked to the railing. "No, Brock," she said loud enough for the cameras to hear. "You ruined your life the moment you decided the law didn't apply to you. I just delivered the bill." 6 months later, General Beatrice Washington drove past the Welcome to Oak Haven sign. It had been repainted. Mayor Cyrus Thorpe's name was gone, scraped off and replaced by Mayor Lena Langston, the waitress whose brother Beatrice had helped free. The Oak Haven Police Department no longer looked like a bunker. The dark tint was peeled from the windows, and the lobby was full of sunlight. Inside, Major Colton Brooks, now retired from the Army, sat behind the chief's desk. The safe where Harlan kept his blue ledger was gone, replaced by a framed copy of the U.S. Constitution. "We scrubbed it clean, General," Chief Brooks said, pouring coffee. "Every corrupt officer is gone. The settlement money? It's fully funding the Tobias Whitaker Youth Center." Beatrice nodded, looking out at a town that was finally breathing. "And Harlan?" Brooks smirked. a look of grim satisfaction crossing his face. USP Florence Supermax. He spends 23 hours a day in a concrete box. The guards tell me he screams orders at the walls, thinking he's still the chief. He writes letters to the governor demanding his badge back. They use them as coasters. Karma hadn't just knocked, it had kicked down the door. The predator was now the caged animal, rotting in his own delusion, while the community he terrorized began to heal. As Beatrice walked back to her car, a young black man stopped her near the sidewalk. He didn't flinch, run, or look down. He simply extended a hand. "My mom says you're the lady who made it safe to walk at night," he said softly. Beatrice shook his hand. It was warm and firm. "Walk tall, son. The road is yours." She got into her Ford Taurus, adjusted the mirror, and merged onto the highway. She didn't look back. The war in Oak Haven was won, but the general's watch never ended. Iron B was just getting started. Brock Harlan thought he was untouchable. He thought the badge on his chest was a shield against consequences, but he learned the hard way that when you abuse power, you don't just break the law. You invite a force of nature to correct you. General Beatrice Washington didn't just win a court case. She dismantled a kingdom of corruption with nothing but her integrity and a refused unconstitutional order. It's a stark reminder. Authority without accountability is just tyranny waiting to be toppled, and sometimes the person you underestimate is the one who holds the keys to your destruction. What would you have done if you were in the general's position, or taken matters into your own hands sooner? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, make sure to smash that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see the bad guys lose, and subscribe for more stories where the underdog or the 4-star general bites back. Stay safe, know your rights, and I'll see you in the next one.